Welcome, listeners, to today's episode of the Black Business Roundtable. I am your host, Doug Blacksher, broadcasting to you live from the city of Diversity, Oakland, California. The mass school shooting in Uvalde is still on our mind, as funerals for the fallen have begun. The teacher that was shot and killed, her husband, approximately 2 days later, died of a heart attack. It must have been so overwhelming for him that his heart was just so broken at the loss of his wife and soulmate. I can't even imagine that, Dr. Ashley. His heart couldn't take it. The absence of how they have the broken hearts together. When that broken heart left, he left. Wow, that's amazing. There is a gentleman making, of all things, caskets for the children killed in this horrific and senseless act of violence. He is making the casket that reflects the things each individual child adored, such as an action hero adorned on the casket. On the other hand, Governor Abbott of Texas was booed after showing up in Uvalde recently, and shouts from the crowd rang out. I think people might be getting tired of these mass shootings of weapons of mass destruction. Also, RAFAEL CANCUN CRUZ, he does not like to be called Raphael. That's hilarious. So, we will, excuse me, we will call him that from now on, Raphael. He showed up in a Texas restaurant, and another patron was irate. He would dare show his face in public. People may be getting fed up when you start seeing kids getting killed. And from what I saw, the police just stood outside for an hour. So I'm going to keep going, but that's something. If that were my kid, police badge or not, and I had a weapon, anyway, shout out to that patron. I would have shouted at him, called the waiter, and immediately bring my bill and ask anyone that truly grieves for the Uvalde families to stop eating, ordering, get your bill paid, and leave. As how can you sit in a room with a Raphael CANCUN CRUZ who had blood on his hand? Republicans, it's time to pony up. I mean, we are at critical need of your injecting some kind of control on kids. And yes, kids buying mass destruction weapons and think they're playing a video game. We also just experienced another shooting in Oklahoma, but that incident from news reports was over and quick. Within 3 minutes, a police handled that situation. The police handled that situation. No sitting on the sideline for 77 minutes, as reported in Uvalde. Lives were surely spared due to their quick response. I follow someone on Instagram that is a working adult and family man going through law school, and he delivers his experience from a Black man's perspective. You can find him on Instagram and at the Mask Law Student. Once again, the Mask Law Student. Hashtag the Mask Law Student, or on his YouTube channel. In regards to gun control, he brought up the Mulford Act of California. I had to personally look up the Mulford Act, and it is in connection with the Black Panthers and stopping them from their armed patrol in Oakland, California. I think his idea is worth taking a look, and just the word Black Panther gives imagery of Oakland's past. Read up and follow him on his point post. We see you, brother. We got Black Business Roundtable is watching out, looking out for you, and you keep looking out for the people, informing. That's what we need, information out there. Now for today's political corner, which reflects who is and is not, locally and nationally honoring their commitment to work for their constituents. Legislators of Oakland and minority contract enforcement. Federal dollars where are they flowing to? Once again, federal dollars, where are they flowing to? Because in Oakland, they're not flowing to the Black businesses. Out of $500 million, and I say this because I want that to ring in people's ear. A city that is known to have progressiveness, Black Panthers, etc., spends $500 million plus in contract services, and only 0.32% of those dollars go to Black businesses. So that is 1.4 million out of $500 million. It's shameful. Shame, 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 Oakland. A special thanks to our sponsor. Thank you, Mr. Donnie Glover of BlackUSA.News. And be sure to tune in to Chapman Friends on Monday, Party Marty, Let's Talk on Tuesday, Black USA Crypto News with Kamal Hubbard on Fridays, as he knows all about blockchain and cryptocurrency. On Saturdays, live from New York, my sister, Blackout with Tajmir Gather. And Sunday, 60 Minutes in Black USA with Michael Haney. Magnolia Engineering and Construction. Tammy is President, Chief Executive Officer of Magnolia Engineering and Construction, one of the few African-American, female-owned and operated engineering and construction firms in the country and located in Oakland, California. Visit their website to learn more at magnoliaengineeringandconstruction.com. Because if our daughters can see her, our daughters can be her. And that is, their website is magnoliaengineeringandconstruction.com. To be considered a guest or to join our advertising family, send your company name and or your name, address, website, company phone number, and social media page info to our email address, and that's bbt2021@hotmail.com for vetting consideration. Now for today's highlights. Today we will discuss with our guests minority contracts and federal dollars in Oakland, California. What is happening to these dollars, and where is the accountability? So let's follow the money. And I said that before, if you want to catch a crook, just follow the money and see where it flows. We will also touch on Uvalde, Texas, the Soulmate bound, and the recent Oklahoma shooting, as there is still trauma and grieving being processed. Helping us through is our in-house professional and weekly show co-host, my ride or die, my sister, my colleague, and my friend, Dr. Ashley Coleman, Doctor of Psychology, tenure and immediate past department chair, assistant professor of psychology at University of the West. Good to see
Hi,
you, Doc.
Doug. Always great to be here with you. Thanks.
The new hashtag for Carlton is hashtag standing with Carlton of Raleigh, NC 2022. We will keep you updated on this case. If you have any messages and to share with Carlton, please forward to BBRT 2021 at hotmail.com and put in the subject line hashtag stand with Carlton of Raleigh NC 2022. And the NC stands for North Carolina. Our guests today include, once again, I love saying your name, Doc, because Woosah. It's like me saying, ooh, Dr. Ashley, Woosah. Our weekly check-in with our very own Dr. Ashley Coleman. Once again, newly tenured and immediate past department chair, assistant professor of psychology at University of the West. Welcome, Dr. Ashley.
Thank you.
Allyssa Victory, Esquire,
Hmm.
a civil rights leader, educator, and licensed attorney serving across the Bay Area and the state of California. Visit her website at victoryforoakland.wordpress.com or her Instagram at Victory for Oakland and Victory for, that's FOR, and I'm sorry I didn't clear that up earlier, Victory for FOR Oakland. Janani Ramachandran, Esquire, will return in June. Friend of the show and running for City Council in District 4 in Oakland, California. Her new website is Janani4, and that's FOR Oakland.com. And new Instagram at Janani, the numeral 4, Janani4 Oakland. Now, for the national political highlights and several elections across this United States. Well, as the song says, ain't no stopping us now. We're on the move. Let's not stop the momentum of this movement. Don't let apathy set in, so remain engaged with the political process by helping from your own home, no matter where you live in the United States. You can help candidates by enlisting to help with their phone banking or texting efforts right at home from your own comfortable lounge chair or couches or beds or wherever you choose to relax. Sign up with the candidates you support today and give an hour a week. Only an hour. Only an hour. Let the politicians know that we are voting and we will vote their butts out. The following three candidates are moving forward in their respective primary in Georgia. Marcus Flowers is a Democratic nominee. Oh, go Marcus. And he's a friend of the Black Business Roundtable.
Hmm.
His hashtag is Send Congress Flowers. And other hashtag Perjury Taylor Green. You can't forget that one.
Mm-mm.
Instagram at Marcus4, and that's the numeral 4 Georgia, or his website is Marcus4, and that's FOR Georgia. Hashtag, once again, is One Georgia, and that's ONE Georgia. Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock is the Democratic nominee moving forward. Go ahead. Senator Warnock, Instagram at Raphael Warnock, or his website, Warnock4, and that's FOR Georgia.com. His hashtag is One Georgia, ONE Georgia. Stacey Abrams is the Democratic nominee for Georgia, just knocking out of the box down. Now, Georgia, I might have to, what's that song? Heading back to Georgia, hometown in Georgia. I'm going to Georgia because they are
Midnight train to Georgia.
midnight train. I'm going to have to be on that midnight train because they are kicking up dust with these nominees down there. Stacey Abrams, her Instagram is at Stacey Abrams, and her website is stacyabrams.com. Hashtag One Georgia, and that's ONE Georgia. My sister, Val Demings, a Democrat, is running for the 2022 Florida Senate seat. Text the word join to 77076. Instagram at Val Demings or her website, valdemings.com. And now for the news of the day, my colleague, my friend, one of the best ride or die persons I've ever written and hadn't died yet, Dr. Ashley Coleman. Please, Dr. Ashley, take it away. And before you start, I want to say this, audience, in the Black community, and I'm going to say this to the men specifically, if you feel a splinter in your brain, if you wake up with issues that are hard to deal with, do what I had to learn to do. Be a real man and go get help. Dr. Ashley, please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, and I appreciate your warm welcome. Great to be here with you, and greetings, listeners. And Doug, as always, I appreciate your advocacy. I believe this month is actually Men's Health Month as well. So what a great way to start to plead to our men and all of our listeners to take care of their mental and physical health. And so, as always, our news of the day is courtesy of the Equal Justice Initiative. So, on this day, June 2nd, 1961, a Virginia judge upheld the racial segregation in courtrooms. So, though courts are supposed to be committed to equal justice under law, judges throughout the country have oftentimes been more committed to racial hierarchy than to the Constitution. And on June 2nd, 1961, a Virginia judge upheld racial segregation in courtrooms, dismissing a lawsuit filed by three Black men who challenged the practice, describing as totally without merit their allegation that segregating courtrooms was degrading. After being forced to sit separately from white community members in the municipal court in Petersburg, Virginia, George Wells, Reverend R.G. Williams, and Reverend Dr. Milton H. Reed sought an injunction to prevent Judge Herbert H. Gilliam, the chief judge of Petersburg Municipal Court, from continuing to subject the Black community members to segregated seating. And the lawsuit asserted that there was no moral or legal justification for courtroom segregation, calling the practice again degrading and shameful. And the federal judge, Orrin R. Lewis, dismissed the lawsuit, describing the allegations of mistreatment as meritless, since an equal number of seats were provided to each of the segregated sections for Black and white community members. So here, again, there's that separate but equal. And he added that segregated seating in courtrooms was a long established practice, and that Judge Gilliam had kept Black and white people separate to, quote, preserve order and decorum in his courtroom. And the U.S. Supreme Court also weighed in and played a significant role in protecting discriminatory Jim Crow laws for decades and shielding the South from challenges to its racial caste system. And we know in Plessy versus Ferguson, the Supreme Court's most well-known decision upholding segregation, the court rejected Mr. Plessy's argument that forced racial separation branded Black people as inferior, and countered, if this be so, it is not by reason of anything found in the act, but solely because the colored race chooses to put that construction upon it. And again, this is courtesy of Equal Justice Initiative. The calendar can be accessed by visiting the website calendar.eji.org. And we also want to highlight EJI's report, Segregation in America, again, which will provide more information about the campaign at the time that offered a massive resistance to integration in schools. And this is history that is not so long ago. For those of us who have boomers or loved ones in that age group, we're talking in their lifetime.
Dr. Ashley, thank you for educating this audience on that horrific one of many stories that we outline each week. And I want to possibly be giving some positive news that might be going on in the city of Oakland. They are manning, and I say manning, uh, filling the position, whether it be man or woman, positions in Oakland, with people who appear to have the um, progressiveness to move the agenda where Oakland has failed the Black business community economically. And once you fail us economically, you fail us in residential, buying home, and every other aspect. But I'm hearing some pretty good things that are coming out of the city of Oakland. And I will keep you apprised of it. Allyssa Victory is coming on shortly, so I'm not going to get into detail. But it is critical that we clean up Oakland and we take that template and share it with other cities across this country. America, Black people are hurting economically. And I want that to sink in. If you want to destroy any group of people, make it impossible for them to have a business, to get in unions, to make good paying jobs, etc., etc. It is time to fight racism and Black economics, not only here in the city of Oakland, but all across this nation. And take that serious. It is a battle. Our kids, our grandkids' lives depend on if we are going to lay down or we're going to stand up like adults. Thank you. And this is not a civil problem anymore. This is a human problem. People are living under the bridge. Dr. Ashley, real quick, people are living under the bridge. And when I drive by and see it, it's disgusting. And 70% of homelessness in Oakland are Black people. And over 50% of that number are senior citizens. And I'm 59, so that could be me. So let's do what we got to do. Thank you. And Dr. Ashley, on that note,
No,
I
it's a
need some
great
therapy.
comment. We all do.
Now I need some therapy, Dr. Ashley.
Oh.
Next up, with our weekly check-in with our very own Dr. Ashley Coleman. And Dr. Ashley, in light of 2 consecutive weeks, and if you notice, I'm right on time today. But on two weeks, we've had mass killings. And I think 4 weeks ago, somebody, a white guy, went into a store purposely killing Black elderly people. Can you help those out there who are getting, and they had, I'm going to say this real quick because I always say that. They had something on Facebook where they had 10 women getting ready to go to the grocery store. It was a fake image, but they all had guns, shotguns, and they said, yeah, we're going shopping now. We're safely going shopping. If you get a chance, if I see that, I'm going to take a picture. But it's scary to really think like that, but that's something to really think about. Thank you, Dr. Ashley. I'm going to ask for your mental therapy. I need you to take that splinter out of my brain today. Thank you.
No, thank you, Doug. And I'm smiling and it feels good to laugh. But what's going on in our country is not funny. It's terrifying. And I believe President Biden in the next couple of minutes is actually going to address the American people to discuss his position and the advocacy that with the bills that are coming up and the discussions that are happening just last week. So 2 weeks ago, as you mentioned, we honored the victims of the Buffalo shooting that were only guilty of being in the wrong place, right place, wrong time, being Black and wanting to be. Actually, that's all they wanted to do was be and grocery shop. And then last week we had to make comments on the loss of life in Uvalde, Texas. And so I wanted to start by first normalizing that hearing about more mass shooting. Again, it can be traumatizing. the feelings of anger, frustration, but also helplessness. Like, what are we supposed to do? The teacher, Ms. Garcia, who we honored as one of the victims of the shooting. 2 days later, her husband, Mr. Joe Garcia, lost his life, and per reports of his family, he laid flowers at the makeshift memorial in front of the school, and then later on that day had a heart attack. And I have to say, that was particularly triggering for me because as a child, I learned very early on that someone could die from a broken heart, and I'm not a physician, but we had a family friend whose daughter died, and 2 days later, the mother died. And so they ended up having a joint funeral, and that stuck with me. I had to be about maybe 10 years old. And it was a very early lesson to understand that grief can be smothering. Uh huh.
Audience, I'm gonna ask a question that I think the audience is can you? I mean, because we
Yep.
this
Mm
segment up just
hmm.
for this.
Mm
Can you explain to the audience? Because somebody, well, how can they die with someone else die?
hmm.
But and I liken this to where we have gotten so close to a significant other, to a child,
Mm hmm.
to bond to where we get used to seeing each other. How that can make your health
Mm
physical. Can you chime in on that so our audience can have a feel for how this could happen? Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ashley.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I'll do it to the best of my ability without, you know, staying within the confines, my scope of practice. But when we talk about bonding with someone, a child, a significant other, but also sudden death, and in both of the situations where the first person passed, it was sudden, unexpected loss. So if you can think of, and all of us kind of sit back and think of when's the last time you felt the rug pulled from underneath you, something happening that you didn't see coming, abrupt, that shaped your life forever. And for some people, Doug and listeners, we've been very protected or privileged from that. For other people, it was COVID, where one minute they went to work on, was it Wednesday, March 11th, 2020. And by the end of the day, as things started to slow down, the NBA and this and this and that, and it became very certain by the end of that day that life was going to be different. And the panic of that first week, when we thought this was only going to be a 2 week thing, but the panic and understanding that life, what's happening, and trying to ground yourself. Well, with death, it's final within this realm. And so not being able, losing a loved one unexpectedly without any type of grief preparation process, being able to say goodbye, and then it's overwhelming. It's trauma. We can have a fight response, we can have a freeze response, we can have a flight response, we got freak out. And I think it can just be completely overwhelming to the heart and mind. And then we're talking about with bereavement, a natural part of grieving is sometimes thinking, I want to be with my loved one. I don't know how I'll make it without my loved one. And so clearly, when we're talking about stress, again, on the boundaries of my scope of practice, cortisol is the stress hormone. I keep kind of going back to that. And so if we think about what must shoot up our hormones, heart rates, when we're experiencing that level of trauma, um, I imagine pre existing condition or not, or any other experiences of trauma, um, or anyone who's also had a broken heart. It can feel like, even with a breakup, that you're dying because a part of you is grieving. And so after hearing about Mr. Garcia's passing, the understanding that 4 children lost both of their parents within a 48 to 72-hour span, um, I grieved for them.
Dr. Ashley, how would what would you suggest that our audience do? And audience, I want you to be clear because we have a lot of um, viewers out there who have
Mm,
people in, um, how can I put it? They have people in the teaching industry,
mm,
educators, administrators, and
mhm,
to have this horrific thing to happen. I mean, in a grocery store, you can
mhm,
kind of, I won't say you can avoid going to grocery. Well, you can shop online, they can deliver it. But when these kids show up to school, not only in Texas,
mhm,
but in California,
mhm,
Wyoming, Oklahoma, New York, would you suggest, would you urge that schools get more counseling? Parents
mhm,
who have the resources get
mhm,
counseling? Because one of the things that you said last week stuck
mhm,
with me.
mhm,
If your child comes to you and says, "Hey, dad, I don't want to go to school."
mhm,
Now, for some Americans, that is an option.
mhm,
But for most Americans, parents have to go to work and make money. They're living
mhm,
paycheck to paycheck. They got to pay
mhm.
rent, and gas is what, $7 a gallon now here in California.
Right.
And then in Oakland, they're already shutting down schools,
Mhm,
making it more expensive and difficult for people of color to get an education who are financially challenged.
mhm,
So, can you tell our audience, Dr. Ashley, signs that this incident that happened in Texas,
mhm,
what signs can you look for in your children?
mhm,
And second part of this question is
mhm,
for parents.
mhm,
Some parents can take things a lot better than other parents, whether you're a man or a woman. But
mhm.
some of the signs that a husband or a wife could see in not only the children, but the significant other. Thank you, Dr. Ashley.
Sure. And are we, just to clarify, signs that these shootings are impacting them? Um, I think one, I would say, and I did say that last week, and Doug, I'm glad you gave me an opportunity to speak on that again, because I do want to acknowledge the privilege of that, and I also want to acknowledge the fact that in general, we need to be having conversations with our children and investigate when they don't want to go to school. And one of our reflexes when we're experiencing danger that feels like we can't put our finger on it, right? So we're talking about can't go to the grocery store, can't go to school, can't go to church. And then also, as of recently, the mass shooting in Tulsa, Oklahoma, can't go to the doctor, where two doctors, in addition to a receptionist, in addition to someone who was just there seeking their own medical care, were killed. So it feels like the world is getting very small. And one of the things we do is kind of cocoon to protect ourselves. But I think, first of all, is talking to your child. If you haven't talked to your child about the school shootings, and this is up to parental discretion given developmental age, but let you know your teacher, your child's teachers and administrators are talking about it. So I had a conversation with a parent this week that said, "Oh wow, my child came home. We were intentional about shielding them from the news, but my child came home and started asking me questions based on a conversation that the school had." And so I like the parents to kind of initiate the conversation, and so they get the first pass at what they want their children to know. But anytime a child is avoiding school, that may be saying that they're sick, a stomach ache, headaches, taking long with their routine. Again, just dread. And so asking questions. So, what did your school say today? How do you feel about going to school? Um, is there anything that you want to know? What can mommy and daddy do to make you feel safer? And again, reestablishing safety. But it's normal right now for students and adults to, again, not feel fully grounded because we don't have an answer and we don't have a plan. And so when there is no answer and there is no plan, there is a sense of just floating. And so, again, just asking parents to think about what are some safety practices that you can do to make your child feel safe. For instance, Doug, I don't know if you know this, but there are bulletproof backpacks that are now on the market and they are through the roof in price. Yes, I said it again. I'm going to say it again. There are bulletproof backpacks being sold and marketed for K through 12, and the price of them went through the roof. Um, on various websites after the school shooting, very similarly to how we've seen the price of like Plan B or other things go through the roof after discussion about Roe versus Wade. And so, right now, each household is tasked with taking extra steps to protect their child.
Well, let's be clear here, audience. We know in many black and brown communities, they won't be buying those bulletproof backpacks.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be another issue in itself on a whole other show.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ashley, for those parents who are watching and for those who can't afford to go see a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
can you name off some organizations?
Mm-hmm.
Because some parents are like, well, I can't even, I can barely afford to put food on my table. I can't afford to put
Mm-hmm.
my, but there, audience, there are organizations out there
Mm-hmm.
under the, I won't say the Obama Act, but I think it's the American Medical Act, but there's organizations out there that people who are having anxiety attacks,
Mm-hmm.
depression,
Mm-hmm.
kids are you know don't know what to do, know what to say because they know their parents have to work and make money
Mm-hmm.
to pay the bill. Can you name off a few and do it slow so that our audience can capture the moment? Write these things down because, audience, let me tell you something. This is the time to reach out. Just like if you had a broken leg, you couldn't walk, you'd go see a doctor to tell him to put a cast on it. If you had a cavity, you would go see a dentist. This is a medical emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Ashley, please, can you name off some? And I know you have a few organizations
Mm-hmm.
that people can call that are not just here in Oakland or LA where you are, or
Mm-hmm.
involved, but nationwide, coast to coast. Thank you, Dr. Ashley.
Sure. So one of the things first, before I speak to that, is I want to just acknowledge what you just said. We have health disparities in this country. And so, yes, when we have toothaches and we have headaches and we have physical things, the idea of being able to access care is something that unfortunately not everyone can do. So sometimes what can happen is we can do the best we can and coping the best way we can, and we become accustomed to pain not being addressed. And so, what we want to do definitely is make mental health accessible. Also, I want to, before I list the organizations that I'm thinking of, I want to acknowledge what you said about school counselors. They were one of the first things to be cut in our schools. So I remember some of my school counselors. I want to acknowledge Miss Sharon Bowles, wherever she is. She was at Montera, and then I think at Skyline when I was there too. But dedicated counselors who you could go to that actually believed in your ability and did not laugh when you said, "I wanted to go to college. I want to go to college. I want to be a doctor." Put you in the classes and worked with parents to put me in the perfect classes to be on that path, and then also someone that you could trust and go to um, if something was going on. So unfortunately, we need to definitely advocate for school counselors to return in the school. Also school nurses, because they can also be the first point of contact too of safety. But when we're talking about organizations, I would encourage parents to first go through for them their jobs. A lot of organizations and employers had to start looking at helping their employees access mental health care. And that was based on COVID, especially if they applied for any type of loan or relief or assistance with, assistance with their payroll. So, one for parents is going through your employer to see what potential benefits can be available to you. Secondly, when we talk about, I would recommend, so there's therapy for Black girls. We're going to put it across the screen. So there's therapy for Black girls, there's therapy for Black men. There are also, what you want to look for is what we call sliding scale clinicians. Sliding scale meaning that many clinicians ethically, even if clinicians don't accept insurance, will hold a number of slots available. Doug?
Audience, I had to expand. I had to give Dr.
Mhm,
Ashley, Dr. Ashley, just recently, in the
mhm,
last year or two, and I wanted to throw this out before I forgot. Audience, depression and anxiety are not the only reasons you need to go see a doctor of psychology.
mhm,
But without going into great detail, because it's in the court systems now, I had to go see a doctor of psychology.
mhm,
And I was able to have the courts pay for it.
mhm,
So don't think that you only see a doctor when you have anxiety or depression.
mhm,
I, because I had, and you know a little bit about what I'm
mhm,
going to say, doctor, but at some point through this challenging situation I went through, and once it's over, out of course, I'll be more specific. But then it was fight or flight
mhm.
or freeze, or what was the other one you
Or
said?
freak out.
Or
Mhm,
freak out. Well, I had passed flight, freak out, and froze. So the next thing I was saying, hey, but our urban areas have a significant amount of gun violence and deaths
mhm,
and killings and
mhm,
stabbings
mhm.
because our people say, well, hell, we can't depend on the police, and I'm not going to let this person keep bullying me. And that creates a pattern of crime in the inner cities. So I want to put this out there and you tell me what you think, Dr. Ashley. If you have a neighbor who has threatened your life, if you have a neighbor who is, or a colleague at work who's pissing you off, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, those are things that you can still see a doctor of psychology on that will give you coping skills.
Mhm,
Look at that, look at that, look at that, look at that. Wait a minute.
mhm,
Wait, hold it. How do preachers say, hold it, hold it, hold it. Coping skills.
mhm,
Because in many, many urban areas across this country, many people who look like you and I, Dr. Ashley, we don't feel comfortable calling the police when we have issues in our
mhm,
neighborhood.
mhm,
So when you have one irate person making a calm person irate, then that calm person get irate, then you got a problem. Then you
right,
so
right.
can you expand how important it is
Mhm,
to, if you are living in a neighborhood where you having issues with your neighbor
mhm.
or whatever, the dog barking at night or a colleague at work, how important it is to seek help before you do so. You got two angry people, which can cause devastating consequences. Thank you, Dr. Ashley.
Yes, no, that's a great point. But I just want to go back to sliding scale just to help people access, and then I'll definitely come back to that. But again, most clinicians will hold what we call sliding scale slots available, which mean that we have a number of slots where someone is able to, their fee is set based upon income and what they're able to pay. And so even when you're calling potential, and I say call around, and you're asking, make sure to also ask about, do you have sliding scale slots available, because here we are. We were in a health pandemic and still are, but also became a mental health pandemic. And again, there's also the association. I want to say this again. Again, the Association of Black Psychologists, ABPSI, they have a listserv and a list of Black psychologists available. We're out here now in the bigger scheme of things, Black psychologists are 2% of all psychologists in the country. However, we're out there, but it's not, I don't think it's not that we're unavailable. We're swamped right now, but we can make space. So if you need the help as early as possible, making an appointment, having someone call with you, because what do we know? It can be difficult to call, but you're going to wait. You're going to have a period of a waiting list, and we want to get you in as soon as possible. But what we're really talking about, Doug, and I'll go to your next point soon, is health disparities. It has become, wellness has become expensive. And so, yes, there are resources available. There are people that you can talk to, and most clinics or private practices will let you have a consult. So that can be a 10 to 15-minute conversation that allows you to get a feel for your therapist, because you want good fit. Now, I know when we walk into urgent care, ER, we're there and we're like, whoever can do it. My ankle's broken. Whoever can do the X-ray. I just need help. And that's for emergencies. You can always also walk into your emergency room if someone you know is having a mental health crisis or a psychiatric crisis. But if we're talking about an ongoing relationship, well, you'll be opening up about what's going on at work, what's going on with your family, what's going on with you, then yeah, you want to make sure that there's a fit. Now, Doug, what you're talking about, there are many reasons people seek therapy, but one of the things I don't think people are really understanding is um, the public has become more impulsive. And I like to call this, we're in season 3 of the pandemic. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of people are very good at solving temporary problems that are short in duration. Getting to adulthood, that means we have coping skills and problem solving skills that have worked for us. However, starting in March 2020, in addition to whatever it was that everyone was coping with, we also were met with a huge stressor of which we didn't have any control. People are not angry, they're resentful. This idea of displacement of emotions is high. And so, what we're seeing right now is that people are having a shorter fuse. I don't know if you've seen it now that the world is, we've opened up, we've closed back up, we've opened up, the numbers are up, the numbers are down. Gas is $5, gas is $6, gas is $7. So, we're in inflation. There is international domestic terrorism happening. There's still racism, sexism, all these isms happening in addition to their everyday stressors. And so what's I think is happening in the public is you have to pick your battles. You have to watch your surroundings, because one of the things I was taught was that, you can't interact with somebody who has nothing to lose, because you have a future. And so this involves stopping when someone irritates you and counting the cost. So having the oh no, no, we get to you just counting the cost to understand, first stopping, taking a breath, a few breaths, and considering, if I do this, then what? If I do this, then what? Okay. What is being said right now? And oh, I'm angry, I'm tense. Do I feel threatened? Am I trying to protect myself? Okay, I'm angry. But just because I'm feeling angry doesn't mean I have to retaliate or react. I can still respond from an empowered place. Can I let this roll off my back? Do I really have anything to prove right now? Okay, this person's being rude. This person is cutting me off in line. Who do they think they're talking to? You know what? I just want to make it home. And so observing the body and centering yourself to not be in a situation where someone is pulling you into their instability, their storm. They're looking maybe for a fight. They're irritated. They're wanting to let off steam. You don't know what they just heard, and maybe they're just looking. You don't have to be the target. You don't have to accept any invitation for an argument. So, one of the things that I learned in Oakland, I'm going to let you have it. I'm going to let you have it. I'm gonna let you have it because I'm going somewhere. I'm gonna let you have it. And so, really trying now, of course, there are different situations, but again, letting yourself understand that right now there's a shorter fuse, and we're seeing this. People have lost empathy. There's a lot of people in this country have lost empathy. So again, when the financial resources are low, and the cost of living is high, and we have and people are experiencing threats of being unhoused or unemployed, and still trying to take care of their parents and take care of their children and take care of themselves, and they can't hear themselves think. People are coping the best way they can, but we're seeing people have various outbursts. So that's one of the ways you can go to therapy for that. But I think managing emotions is one of the most important reasons to go to therapy.
Dr. Ashley, that was well said.
Thank you.
And this, I'm not a doctor, but, you know, through history and through careful documentation of history when it comes to mass murder, killing, etc., you'll find one group of people have more people within that group that are doing the shooting and killing. I was told by quite a few doctors of psychology that, and not you, Dr. Ashley, but the reason for Black people having less mass murder in their group of people and committing these is because we have become numb. We've become used to being dehumanized and treated unfairly. So when you have had the privileges all your life of being better than another group of people, richer than another group of people, and then when you see that group of people coming to fruition, you take that mentally. Some people take that mentally, and I try to do as much reading as I can. I saw one white person in a store, big white man, about 6'2", and this Black woman came in there. She seemed to be doing well, and the white guy called her. Somehow they got into an altercation, and this guy starts punching her, and the woman was only about 5'4", but he starts punching her like she was a man.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah.
Oh, you saw that?
I did. Mm-hmm.
And at first I said, you know what? Let me do some fact checking here. This actually happened. White, Black, Hispanic, Asian, and other. I hope you get a chance to pull this up. A 6'2", 200+ pound man starts beating up on this 5'3" Black female for no reason. I mean, he's throwing. Now, I gotta say this because I've always been taught and raised, and you know me all my life. If I had been in that store, oh my God, I wouldn't have had time to call you, Dr. Ashley, to subdue my mental things that were going on. To see this man beating the snot out of a sister who had not, and she was not an ignorant sister. She and not even wait, hold on, let me rephrase that.
And even if she, right,
It doesn't make a difference. But to see that, and is that how we? That is going backward. That's what they used to do back 100 years ago.
Well, yeah, and in this situation, it was interracial, but I guess Doug, and it was just absolutely disgusting. Um, and I think one of the things that that we need to understand is that the common denominator between violence, and everyone's looking about this, but um, entitlement
Entitlement.
and lack of empathy is starting a nice recipe of disaster, because when you feel entitled and you think you have a right to treat and talk to and do and touch and all these kind of things, and take out people and in people's lives, it's entitlement. And then the lack of empathy. So I can't perspective take, I can't put myself in your shoes and understand that you don't deserve this treatment and you wouldn't want this treatment and I wouldn't want this treatment. So without that empathy, lack of empathy and entitlement, it is at the core of a lot of mistreatment.
Dr. Ashley, we could go on hours on this subject. Audience, you have heard one of the top doctors of psychology in this country on the Black Business Roundtable articulate and educate you on several things here. Listen to your children, especially in this emotional time that a gunman who is a 18-year-old kid himself, I hope. Anyway, I'm not going to go there. Goes into a school and shoots 19 children, 10-year-old, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids. And to second, for the parents, if you see your husband, your wife, your significant other, your your grandparents who are raising kids now, ask him, what can I do to help? They have many different organizations that have, as Dr. Ashley pointed out, will talk to you because everyone has a breaking point. And last but not least, dealing with neighbors and on-the-job problems that's causing you to feel like you're going to a breaking point, to feel like the next time this beep, beep, beep says anything to me, I'm going to get my beep, beep, beep gun and beep, beep, beep. John Arthur Jones III and Sabir Lockett, who are friends of this show, clearly outline how the lack of mental stability and knowledge that talking to somebody who can give you, especially at an early age, can change the direction of your life. So parents, if you know you see kids who are having problems, reach out and take them to see a therapist. Talk to the school. If you're having problems with your neighbor, reach out to your district attorney and tell them that in addition to needing help dealing with this neighbor or this issue, that they pay for your therapy. If I'm wrong, and I know for a fact they pay for it, but I don't know how they are down there in LA, Dr. Ashley, but up here, they will pay for your therapist. It is not being less of a man, a woman, a grown-up to ask for help. If you have a broken leg, you are guaranteed you'll go see a doctor, and you have a cavity, I guarantee, once again, you will go see a dentist. When you feel like you are on the verge of picking up a weapon, of swinging on somebody, anything that is not civilized, and we all know what civilized is. Going over because my neighbor called me a punk and punched him in the head, that's not civilized. Anything that you feel that's going to cause you to do something that's going to take your freedom away. So let's break it down, Dr. Ashley. And I know we're going into commercial break in a few minutes. It will take your freedom away. And once you
I think that, but anything, even before that, Doug, I think anything that will, just interject, going to therapy, we don't have to wait till, so sometimes people don't go to the dentist until, because of resources, until it gets to the point of a tooth pain or something so far severe where the next thing you know, it's a root canal. And so, what we're trying to get again is this view, which I appreciate your advocacy, is looking at health and checkup. So, even if things aren't catastrophic, what's going well? And the same thing is you can go to therapy and work on what's going well to maintain it and to also protect. The same way we can go to gym to strengthen our bodies, not necessarily lose weight, but strengthen our bodies and improve. And so if you see that your behavior is changing, your mood is changing, or as Doug is saying, that you're having a shorter fuse, getting that feedback and getting resources so that you can nip things in the bud. So prevention is also something really important.
Dr. Ashley, on that note, take us to commercial break. We have, I believe, our
Yes.
special guest backstage. But audience, once again, you hear me talk about going through seeing doctors for the mental part. When I went through several legal challenges and cost 2-3 years, if I didn't go see somebody, I wouldn't be here with you today.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you. Dr. Ashley, please take us away.
Thank you, Doug. Again, thank you, Mr. Donnie Glover of BlackUSA.news. This is a wonderful platform where we can talk about and keep it real. And want to invite our listeners to tune into Chap and Friends on Mondays, Party Marty Let's Talk on Tuesdays. There's Black USA Crypto News with Kamal Hubbard on Fridays. And again, please tune into him to learn more about blockchain and cryptocurrency. On Saturdays, there's the Blackout Live from New York with Tajmir. And then on Sundays, there's 60 Minutes in Black USA with Michael Haney. A special acknowledgement to our sponsor, Magnolia Engineering and Construction. Magnolia is unique, offering engineering and construction services and a comprehensive administrative and compliance component. And again, to be considered a guest on our show or to join our advertisement family, please send us an email enclosed with your name, your company details, and your company's website. Please address that email to bbrt2021@hotmail.com for vetting consideration. Doug, back to you.
Well, audience, I believe we have her backstage.
Mm-hmm.
Well, audience, please welcome back Allyssa Victory Esquire. We will be discussing the issue of minority contractors not being represented on projects in Oakland, California that has federal money and how this how it hurts Oakland from federal money not flowing to minority contractors. And what are the consequences? Once again, what are the consequences for those skirting the system? Dr. Ashley, can you please read this civil rights labor lawyer's outstanding resume? Thank you.
Absolutely. And so happy to have Allyssa Victory back. So, Allyssa Victory Esquire is a civil rights leader, educator, and licensed attorney serving across the Bay Area and state of California. She holds a Bachelor of Arts with honors in ethnic studies and minor in Black studies, as well as a Juris Doctorate concentrated in government law. She currently practices in policing and labor law and is an elected ADM delegate to the California Democratic Party for Assembly District 18. She will be the first Black woman elected to mayor of Oakland. Welcome back, Allyssa. So happy to have you join us again.
Thank you. Good evening, afternoon. We're getting closer to the evening, but great to see you all and happy June. I can't believe
Thank you.
we're already in a new month.
Right. Yes.
Well, audience, let me be clear here. We have a couple of dozen people running for mayor in Oakland. And I've asked each and every one of them to come on to the show to educate our Oakland listeners, our Alameda County listeners, our California listeners, and all across the United States. What are you willing to do to ensure integrity as we move forward in politics and voting for a new mayor? And Allyssa Victory not only has stepped up to give her platform, her method her civil rights understanding labor laws that are impacting all people in the city of Oakland, but her time. Allyssa, welcome back to the show. And once again, this is the type of person who exemplified, hey, I got a platform and I'll say it anywhere, because if it wasn't correct, I would challenge it. If it was a problem, I would challenge it. So we appreciate you coming on today, helping our audience, specifically Black businesses, understand how important it is when you are, and I say you, when you're elected, when you're negotiating a project labor agreement, a community works agreement, and you, unlike the city, you don't have a lawyer to break out what's good for you and what's bad for you within the confines of that contract. So, how are contracts awarded in the city of Oakland for developers first? Thank you.
Thank you again for having me to talk about one of my favorite topics of labor employment and how our own contracting practices can lead to an inequitable result, and how there's also a way that you can also lead to more equity and economic justice. Right now, our city, gives out contracts itself. They have their own contracting process, and the city has been auditing itself and putting out data documenting that over the last 5-6 years, it has been doing this so unequally that vast majority, have gone to white-owned businesses, with only small percentages going to all the rest of the non-white owned businesses in our entire city. It certainly doesn't reflect, again, the diversity of Oakland, the richness of a lot of our small and local owned businesses, and the entrepreneurship that we have here. And so the city has already confirmed that it's engaging in inequitable contracting, that its own rules, its processes, the way it advertises contracts, the way it educates the public about opportunities and gives people time to actually submit that evidence or their packages and proposals, is not being done in a way that's reaching everyone equally, and certainly not our Black-owned businesses. When you talk about kind of federal funding, there's a lot of different pieces that the city has the most control over, city-funded projects, things that only involve city dollars, city lands, or city officials. When it comes to federally funded projects, there may be requirements that come from that funds that the city can't necessarily change, but could certainly advocate for or push back on. At the federal level, there is an executive order that Biden signed February of this year, mandating PLA agreements be in place for any federal projects that, I think the threshold is 35 million or more. So they're only mandated in kind of a limited set of circumstances from the federal government's perspective. Our city, again, does not have a citywide project labor agreement around construction contracts, but they're in the process of going through the task force that is specifically aimed at addressing the racial inequity in the construction jobs and construction contracts that our city has been giving out, that has been available. And so that is their specific mandate. Again, they've continued to have meetings. Their most recent one was May 17th, where they were looking at specific proposals about mandating local hire, mandating education in our high schools about these job opportunities. So I know I'm kind of getting long-winded on the answer to your question, but depending on the types of contracts, who's funding it, the city may or may not have full control, but it's clear that the ones we have full control over, that we are giving them out, awarding them inequitably, and that leads to our businesses having to shutter their doors. They're losing out on actual money, right? They're losing out on the city as a client. They're losing out on those relationships. They're losing out then on the next contracts because they don't have that relationship or that history to show. They're losing out on opportunities to expand their businesses, to hire more workers, right? And so if it's only being put into the hands of certain demographics, then our businesses and the workers that they hire are going to continue to look the same. So we're having Black-owned businesses trying to break into this, trying to have an actual remedy for the disparity we've now documented and confirmed. Because we know when Black-owned businesses are successful, they're going to hire Black workers. They're going to be engaged in their community. They're going to listen to feedback. They're going to be culturally sensitive and responsive. So it's important that the city is not forcing us to only have a certain model of business and certain business leadership, but that they are ensuring that there is a pathway to equitable economic opportunity to allow all businesses to thrive, workers to thrive, and industries to thrive. When I was talking about PLAs, those are very specific to the contracting industry, but again, is moving through our city right now with this task force. And so it is a large conversation around where the city is going to land. If there's going to be new policy, new regulations, or a citywide PLA that gets put into place that mandates equity, that mandates diversity, that mandates removal of barriers to people getting into jobs that are then awarded these contracts to build on billion-dollar projects. So I'll stop there and see if you have other specific questions. I could talk all day long about labor.
Well, you know what, audience? Once again, I've asked every candidate who's running for mayor to come on to the show. This candidate who's running for mayor has outlined that under the current mayorship in the city of Oakland, contracts are given out to mostly, if not all, white men, over $500 million, when only $1.3 million in contracts are given out to Black businesses. And there's statistical data that proves this. There was a disparity study done by Mason Tillman, Dr. Ramsey, that proves this. Instead of us talking about the problem now, we have a candidate on this show who's going to talk about solutions as we move forward in this conversation here today. I am proud to say that I've known Allyssa Victory, and her being a labor lawyer is exactly what we need, because I think the mayor in office now was a lawyer, but how's that working for Black businesses in Oakland?
Right. And all mayors are not cut the same. All lawyers are not.
What I mean by that is we have a large percentage of Black businesses that are out of business now. We have homelessness. 70% of homeless people are Black, and over 50% of that Black homelessness are elderly people who are living under bridges now. I've talked to many people who are homeless and elderly, and they said that they went out of business because they couldn't get into unions, or they had a business in Oakland and it went out of business. So this is not just happening here in Oakland, California. This is happening all across the nation. So I'm going to stop there, and Dr. Ashley, because I'm going to take my glasses off in a minute. I'm going to start really getting into it. But please ask the next question, because this is shameful. We have a disparity study that shows the unfairness and opportunities here in the city of Oakland. And, all I keep hearing people tell me about when I go to these meetings, well, we're working on a plan. Well, the disparity study that they did recently, they also did one in 2002. Why don't you just blow the dust off of that one that's sitting on someone's shelf and use those two and say, hey, we're not going up, we're going down. And that's a fact. Thank you, Dr. Ashley, please.
Government loves, reports and data without really focusing on solutions and implementation. And this is all, like I said, a larger design, one that we're seeing everywhere across our country. They just released our reparations report from the state task force that's 500 pages documenting anti-Black racism and harm from our government institutions, private actors in the state of California. Oakland is cited as many examples, including for redlining and now health hazards, and how that redlining map adds up to similar economic disparities, health disparities, opportunities in our city. And so again, this has been the design, and I'm running to redesign our city, to redesign governance to serve more equitably.
Mm-hmm. And Allyssa, I'm glad you brought up the reparations report. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Dr. Cheryl Grills, who's a Black female psychologist, a powerhouse, and a professor at Loyola Marymount University. And so she's on that task force assisting Gavin Newsom with some ideas about how we can access resources and, again, just repair. But Allyssa, I know we're talking on the city level about contracts. How how do federal dollars play into this?
I talked about it a bit that we do get federal funds in Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are for very specific projects. Some of them are for regional things like highways that aren't really necessarily just limited to the city or controlled by the city. So
Okay.
there's partnership funding. There's funding that's directed that has to go to certain services or to certain areas of our city budgets. There are funds that, again, are partnered on certain projects. Right now, the federal government, in terms of contracts, is mandating that there are PLAs for federal projects that are worth 35 million or more. But smaller projects, again, projects that might just have some federal sponsorship, but not entirely a federal project controlled by their government, we have a lot more freedom and leeway to have our local rules around contracting control that process. So the federal government doesn't have a lot of specifics for how the city has to conduct its business. The city, again, has policies and procedures right now that are in place that are producing inequity, right? The federal government isn't telling them you have to do this, you have to keep this in place. It's who is going to have the political will and the really people-centered will to serve and to change those things in a way that makes sense, that still reaches the goals of having construction or building and things done and having projects completed, but again, is making sure that everybody has equal opportunity for the economics around that project. I can't say right now off the top of my head how much federal dollars are in Oakland right now. There was a lot that came through pandemic assistance. And again, a lot of those were marked for specific funding things around healthcare provision, around emergency funding needs in our city. Sadly, a percentage of it went to our police department instead of some of the emergency services and needs that we saw created during COVID. So we do have, funds that come from the federal government as well as the state, even the county. And sometimes those come with restrictions on who they can be given to, how they can be given out. Sometimes we're not in control ourselves, but can help just put out the call. But the ones that are solely city funded, city controlled, city land, those are things that we can make the most and largest impact and the quickest changes. And again, when we're partnering with other government agencies or entities, it has to be about the relational piece of who is willing to say, hey, this requirement is not going to lead to equity in our city if we put out this proposal on the project this way. Or doing outreach to just the hills is not going to be sufficient. So again, we have to have a leader in Oakland that's willing to be that gatekeeper for our city, for workers' rights and for equity and justice when other people are trying to give us funding or develop certain projects here. We have to make sure that it makes sense for where our city is trying to develop and lead.
Wow. You have given us so much information. Audience, if you didn't know why Black businesses are not getting government contracts, and if your friends don't know, tell them to YouTube this show, and by the end of this podcast today, they will be enlightened. Thank you, Allyssa Victory,
Thank
candidate
you.
running for the mayor of Oakland to address the decades of inequitable contracting for people of color in the city of Oakland, California.
Absolutely. I would again encourage you all to check out the task force report that was just released about reparations in the state of California. They do include initial recommendations about how to repair the harm. Some of that includes direct reparations, but they also have many others that include things like more equity and economic opportunity policy. And just today at 2 p.m. at our state capitol, we had cannabis advocates, mostly Black and brown and minority owners, who were talking about the inequity of the high level of state taxation on the cannabis industry, how that is effectively locking out people who are the most harmed by criminalization of cannabis in our state, and is not allowing Black, women, minority-owned businesses to thrive. And one of those speakers was Oakland's own Chaney Turner, who heads our Cannabis Regulatory Commission. So even in every industry, we're still seeing disparity in who is allowed to participate based on these regulations, the requirements, the procedures, the licenses, the fees, who is allowed to participate. And it's often not people that look like me or look like y'all. And so there's so many different minority business groups that are making different demands and coalitions and campaigns that are all really getting at the same thing. And why do we keep instituting policies and regulations of our business that is continuing to lead to inequity, especially in the cannabis industry, where we know and people have been saying since we talked about legalization that the people harmed by criminalization have to be included and enfranchised in this industry. And it's not happening. And guess what? It's because it's people who don't look like us who are making those decisions, who are controlling those seats of power, and who do not have a political will to serve all people and to serve those who are most harmed, who are most vulnerable, and who have been for decades in this state and in our country.
Well, before I ask the next question, we got a mayor in the city of Oakland who will go to Washington, D.C. I'm going to be real slow and methodical because I want an audience to get a feel for what I'm saying. There's an organization called the African American Sports and Entertainment Group. Ray Bobbitt, who is a friend of this show, and this is not from Ray Bobbitt's mouth, this is from my understanding and my knowing what's going on here. The mayor of Oakland, California, Mayor Libby Schaaf, went to Washington, D.C. to get a billionaire more hundreds of millions to build a ballpark that will destroy the ILWU Local 10 and other port operations that have been around for almost over a century. But she has not ever, and I could be wrong, could be some hidden tapes, but she has never mentioned the African American Sports and Entertainment Group being the first Black organization to own a NFL team. And we have some of these chicken pecking organizations running around here being a fan of that kind of lack of participation or inclusion of Black businesses. And it's shameful. It's very shameful. Allyssa Victory, who monitors the federal dollars to be sure contracts include a certain percentage of minority contractors? Thank you.
I mean, our elected officials are supposed to be in control even when awarding them, right? Again, having some accountability around who's going to be hired, things like PLAs can help set that at the outset before anyone's even hired on a project. Once someone is, there should be general reporting, auditing. There is the Government Office of Accountability that puts out some reports, some data. I'm just going to say overall, at every level, especially the federal government, there is a lot of bureaucracy. Like this, there are positions designated. Yes, there are powers included in our elected officials. Again, whether they are willing and have been willing to use that to advocate strongly, loudly, and publicly for equity and transparency in who's being hired and awarded these contracts, who is actually, who is being repeat hired? Are they expanding folks? Are they just giving the contracts to the same friends, the same businesses? There's a lot of that goes on as well. So I can say that whatever reporting, auditing is happening, it's not as strong as it needs to be. It's not done with the intentional lens of equity, of more just compliance of whatever the agreements for a project or contract may have been. And again, if you're not at the table when those things are being negotiated, you're likely not going to be represented. Right? They say if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I say, as long as the table exists, you're probably on the menu. So just knowing that the way things happen in reality is, yes, we can say we want all these things. We can mandate diversity hires, even diversity training has become just a check mark of, well, we've done it or we tried. we advertised to these groups or we made these presentations. And so again, there's kind of a lack to really enforce what equity means, what it looks like, and what it requires from our governments and from our leaders to hold that line. And government can be a lot more accountable to diversity and anti-discrimination laws than private actors and entities can. And so they should be some of the first to be the strongest about holding these lines and requiring compliance and having consequences when people don't. Oftentimes, especially if this is contract-based, the consequence for violating it or failing to adhere to any provisions or agreements around it is lawsuits, is to pay money. And I'm gonna tell you right now, as a lawyer, most of these cases that resolve with money don't repair the emotional harm, the trauma, the loss of trust. If a business has gone out of business during a lawsuit trying to dispute something, it doesn't always bring back that business or those workers. And so there's a lot of consequences that you can't always repair or immediately repair.
I have to ask this question. Dr. Ashley, what is the psychological effect of Black people, young, medium, and old, looking at the city of Oakland, giving multi-million, tens of $1 million contract to their crony friends like Ryan Russo, who just quit? What is the psychological effect? And then lose their house, have to live under the bridge, not only for the elderly people, but for the children. And then they wonder why these children are out here robbing, and because anyway, excuse me, audience, I lost it for a minute. Dr. Ashley, could you please give the psychological effect on Black people as it relates to that? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm laughing, but again, it's not funny. This is just a coping, and I think people of the African diaspora, we tend to humor ourselves and make jokes and try to reframe. But I like what Allyssa said: if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and it's frustrating because early on we can see where the investment is being made, and if you're not investing in the city, then you're not investing in the residents, and then we see quickly who's being set up to succeed or fail. And so the great thing about being from Oakland is we are resilient and we do have this fighting spirit and we don't lay down. And so, again, it's platforms like this and candidates like Miss Victory who, again, recognize yes, I see the stress ball, Doug, that recognize what this beautiful city of diversity has been, what it can be, and want to bring the resurgence back. But it's a depressing time. It's a depressing time when schools are closing in Oakland. It's a depressing time when businesses are closing. Again, these are supposed to be safe havens in many ways and just being a fabric of the community. And when you see your neighbors moving to far out places, um, it increases the anxiety in the sense of who's next? Is it me? Is it me who's next? And it can also foster this sense of competition or, like we say, craps in a barrel mentality, where then the goal is survival. And then at that time, when we talk about entitlement and empathy going out the window, we have a recipe. But yeah, the plan, it seems like right now, the youth are looking around similar to how I did 20 years ago. And it's like, oh, I have to leave temporarily because I'm not, again, we want to set our youth up for success, our businesses up, just the city. It's just, I'm with you. I'm with you in not liking where we've been, but I'm also hopeful in the platform that Miss Victory has shared and her ideas about where she wants to take Oakland.
Audience, you heard it live on the Black Business Roundtable. Not only the effect of a local government purposely excluding specifically Black businesses out of business, but the repercussions, and as Dr. Ashley has so eloquently articulated, the psychological effect of making our young kids saying, hey, we got to move out of here, or we got to start climbing over each other like crabs in a bucket. Oakland, California, you need to be ashamed of yourself. And Dr. Ashley, you are right. I am going to be like the Fighting Irish. You see that the little Irish guy like that? I am going downtown town with a frown until they fix this problem, because it is fixable. Is that correct, candidate for mayor of Oakland? Alice Victory, labor lawyer.
Absolutely. I mean, these problems were created by people, by decisions, by policies, and they can be corrected through those same. Again, the center of all of our crises in Oakland is a lack of political will. People keep feeding us the status quo, or let's just do studies and data as if that's moving the needle on the problem at all. And for Black people and the businesses that are being harmed, we don't need a study or any data numbers to confirm that we need help and we need a different system. We already have the Office of Contracts Compliance within the city of Oakland. We have the newly established Department of Workplace and Employment Standards. Again, there's already internal offices and staff that are supposed to be monitoring these things, that should be ensuring that the contracts are going to equitable represented businesses before we even have to get to an audit years later. Right? So much of our work is just auditing and figuring out, well, all this money and all these resources have not gone to the people who need it or not gone to our residents equally. And the solution right now is from our city is to update the study, is to just talk about it, right? Is to have really small Band-Aid solutions, or well, maybe these Black businesses just aren't doing stuff right and they need to learn how to do X, Y, Z better. And again, none of that is from a place of equity.
I'd like to say this before Dr. Ashley asks her next question. Audience, whether you're here in Oakland, California, Atlanta, Georgia, Chicago, LA, New York, Baltimore, and other countries around the world, all Oakland does, has done, is talk about the problem that we have while compounding the problem times $100 million to $500 million, $500 million. And that's what's happening all across this country. It's shameful that our elected officials. Now, let me stop there, because there's an election coming up, and we can start getting rid of these people. And I am, as our guest here and friend of the show, I am an AD 18 alternate delegate for Pamela Price, who is running for district attorney. But until we start exercising the power of our votes, we will be excluded out of the economic growth of this country, past, present, and in the future. Dr. Ashley, please, while I work out a little bit, can you ask the next question?
Sure. And I think, Allyssa, you started to already answer this, but what are the consequences for not following the guidelines concerning minority contractors on the job?
Again, if they're under contract, usually the consequences themselves are written into the contract and part of that negotiation of you're going to pay a certain amount of money if you violate this contract, or you're going to resolve this in a settlement through this particular private provider. Sometimes it's you're going to get kicked off the project and we're going to replace you with someone else. And a lot of times that depends, again, what type of project, if it's construction, if there's timelines, or if this is some essential space that needs to be built, right? There's a lot of considerations that may go into it, but generally it is offices like Oakland's Office of Contracts Compliance that would have the contracts that the city is entering into, know what compliance means and looks like, and should be monitoring to ensure that compliance is happening, should be putting out regular reports to the city, to our electeds, to our public, that these are the contracts our city is putting out. This is who is compliant, this is who's not, and here are our actions. So we know that there is some type of enforcement. Often, again, it happens through litigation on the contract itself, which would then be handled through our city attorney's office or through other counsel that we hire. And it's a similar structure at the state level and the federal level. Again, there are staff that are designated. We have legal counsel within the city, and the contracts themselves are supposed to have, safeguards or what the actual consequence is if you violate some provision. Go ahead, Doug.
Girl, I'm dying to ask this question. Who hires the directors of these programs that give their friends tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in uncontested bids, who hires these directors? Can you, if we didn't know, can you tell us?
Our mayor controls all of our city
Get out of here.
departments who control their staffing of their departments. I will say, just on some of the waiving competitive bidding requirements, a lot of those things are approved through our city council, right? And so again, you have the power to hold those people accountable through their elected positions. There are going to be 3 seats up on council this November, along with the mayor's seat. So we have a chance to elect an entirely new mayor. So the mayor's seat is open, and an entirely new composition of our 8-member city council, to ensure that there's more accountability to the public for what we'd like to see in terms of addressing these longstanding problems, and that we actually implement and enforce it, right? It's not enough to pass resolutions or to have studies to say we have this office or this department if we are not actually staffing it, and if we're not holding those staff accountable to their mission, to their job duty and job description. And yes, if people are not doing their jobs, or if they're engaging in scandals, right? Scandals that literally violate our public ethics laws, that violate their jobs, then yes, people need to be removed or need to be held accountable through our discipline process. But again, a lot of this is about political will to make that happen, to be transparent and accountable, to even have that type of public reporting of what contracts we're giving out, having regular summaries of what is the status, what is the equity piece of who's receiving those contracts and who's working on them, right? It's easy if we want to do it, right? We can go through a study once we've already harmed people for years and then say, well, that's us doing something, is now we agree that it's happening. That's not enough. It's not enough, and that's not the urgency and the energy that we need around this issue.
Well, is the last question on me, Dr. Ashley? Okay. Before I get this last question out, I got to say that I have to be brutally honest. I've been working with some city council people in the city of Oakland who seem to be open, and I'll name one who's a friend of the show. Rebecca Kaplan has come on. She went to battle for the African American Sports and Entertainment Group. She's now running for Alameda County Board of Supervisors. And her name, once again, is Rebecca Kaplan. Congratulations, kudos to you for being part of helping to usher in one of the first Black-owned NFL-owned team and WNBA women basketball team. Congratulations to you. Also, Pamela Price has worked with, who's running for DA. She's worked with the Ray Bobbitt team on other issues related to this plight. Personally, I've worked with some city council members, and I am going to be naming them off, just like I do Libby. Libby, you can run for me, but you can't hide. I'm going to call you my sister because you're an Oaklander, and you ought to be shaming yourself for hiring directors who would rather ask for forgiveness than permission when it relates to giving out contracts fairly to all the people in Oakland, specifically the people who look like us on this podcast here today. You ought to be shamed, Libby. Ought to be shamed. When you drive around in Oakland and you see all these Black people under the bridge, homeless, no job, you think about what I'm saying. Allyssa Victory, for the last question and closing it out. Hold on. I'm feeling better now. Hold on. Work with me.
To de-stress on, I like it.
Yes. Dr. Ashley has got me on this kick, and I'm telling you, I won't say I would go postal, but I'd be feeling like it for Dr. Ashley, and that's why I continuously support all of her efforts and efforts of doctors all across this nation who are trying to strengthen the mind of people who are being boo-booed on by our local politicians all across this country. To that end, Allyssa Victory, what can any individual do if they suspect minority contractors are not fully represented in their city, county, state, and across this nation? Thank you.
That is huge. Again, a lot of cities, counties may operate a bit differently from ours here in Oakland and Alameda County. But you should start with, is there a department or a staff whose job it is to do that very role, to monitor equity, to take complaints about contracting, to even educate the public around contracting opportunities? If there is, make sure you notify them first. Make sure you submit a formal complaint. Make sure you submit something in email, something in writing to them. If not, I would lobby your elected officials, right? If you're a city council members, if you're county supervisors, to even just take up, right, some data. If they don't know, if they don't have the data in front of them, a lot of times they aren't going to move it forward. And sometimes that's an easy place to start because, again, it doesn't mean they're taking any real actions to address the problem, but just to document it or see how far it goes. And so sometimes just activating people to start having that public discussion. Start asking questions, ask those electeds to ask of the departments monitoring contracts to provide summaries or public reporting, because that often starts even more questions and then seeing patterns that are happening through history or patterns and similarities with other cities and counties. So I'd say individually to help yourself is to go directly to departments or staff that are responsible to push the larger conversation, or if you want the city to engage in things like studies, to make it a part of the public agenda, the public meeting, you can call in yourself and make public comment. It's always stronger though when you connect with more than just yourself. Because again, this is not just affecting one person. That I guarantee in your city, your county, there is at least one other person that has experienced something similar, that you all can work together, you can learn from each other, but even making things like public comment and pushes to your electeds are always going to be stronger and more effective when you have more people, more voices behind you. Oftentimes people will ignore you if it's just you speaking up by yourself, to be honest. It's when you start getting public media attention, it's when all of the comments and they start seeing you're mobilizing other folks to come to their jobs and pay attention to what our electeds are doing, that things start to move. So I would encourage to expand it to a larger coalition or larger public movement beyond just yourself to get more systemic and structural changes. If it's a particular complaint around just your contract, just your application or process, then take that up with any agency or department that's supposed to be handling that. I say all these things with a grain of salt, knowing that a lot of our electeds and even the people they hire in our departments may not be working to serve you, but to serve other interests. And again, that's why some grassroots strategies like really forcing the public conversation, forcing media attention are, ways that you can escalate if people aren't willing to engage with you just as a resident and person that is experiencing the effects of their decision making and their leadership.
Well, audience, it looks like we're going to finish up a little bit early today because I have a ton of questions, but I'm going to save them because I know you're coming back.
Yes, I'll be back.
And audience, as you all know, I am an alternate delegate for the Democratic Party and Alameda County Democratic Central Committee. I also serve as chair of Labor and Economic Development for the Oakland East Bay Democratic Club. I humbly ask that you call your friends, you call your parents, you call your siblings, and you call everyone else out there and have them listen to this show today. Because we have a candidate who's running for mayor in Oakland who is willing to outline the problems that Black America is having, specifically in Oakland, California, as it relates to economic exclusion. And I don't know if you had a chance to watch, I was on the Black Business Expo Olympics about 2 weeks ago, and I clearly outlined economic exclusion, which is going on strong here in Oakland. Also, I'd like to give some kudos to a couple of departments here in Oakland I've been working with, and I'll mention their names if things start going to where Blacks are getting contracts, not just talking about it. But there are a couple of department heads here in Oakland, one at the Port of Oakland. I think her name is Kimberly. I can't think of her last name. The other one here in Oakland, and I'm going to have their name next week because I do want to highlight the positive things that are going on. Bringing in people in city government agencies locally who are going to hold the good old boys accountable to include Black businesses that have been devastated.
Mm-hmm.
And not just because of the pandemic, the corona COVID virus, but before.
Mm-hmm.
They were devastated before. So please have your friends, your cousins, family members, friends, and tell your enemies if they're Black, hey, look, you want to find out why you're not had a contract? Look, go look at the Black Business Roundtable. Allyssa Victory, Esquire, currently running for mayor of Oakland, California, community organizer, civil rights, and labor attorney. And that's what we need in Oakland right now. We need our civil rights to get contracts. And like I said, I have a couple of city council people who I'm working with and directors and of some of these departments here, not only in Oakland, but the Port of Oakland. And I'm going to be reaching out to the county of Alameda because they have some problems with their Alameda County Housing Secure Emergency Rental Assistance Program. So I'll be mentioning some names coming up in the near future. But I don't want to do that. I'm hoping that our political people will start doing the right thing. Allyssa Victory and friend of the Black Business Roundtable, we are thankful for educating. We're thankful to you for educating our audience. And audience, let me tell you something. Lawyers cost up to $1,000 to maybe $2,500 an hour. Allyssa, just give me your address and I'll come by and sweep up the leaves and clean up in front of your house because we are a nonprofit organization. But
I appreciate that. I mean, I'm a people's lawyer. I've always worked in the public interest since getting my degree, and a lot of people have, asked me for some free legal advice or referrals since I've been running this campaign. And part of me being, 3% of Black lawyers nationally, I understand a lot of people don't know a lawyer, don't know how to access one, or can't afford one. And so I'm always happy to help break down what the legal analysis is, what legal meaning is behind these decisions and policies. I think that's what's necessary because so much of what our city business is very legal and technical to the point where some of our electeds don't seem like they know what they're doing or voting on and come to attorneys like me to advise them on what to do, how to do it. And so we can skip that step by electing an actual civil rights attorney to lead our city in this upcoming election. So thank you again to this amazing roundtable, to your leadership for bringing up important topics like our mental health, which is not talked about enough in our Black community or even Black businesses. Please follow me, connect with me. Again, I'm running to be the first Black woman mayor of our city. I am a people's candidate, so you will always find me with the people. Talking to y'all, whether it's online or in the streets. We'll be on the streets tomorrow at First Friday in Oakland, downtown, 6 to 10. Contact us, Victory for Oakland, on social media, victoryforoakland.com. We're also going to be announcing soon the date and location of our business roundtable in person that is really talking to Oakland business owners, Black and African business owners, downtown businesses about these very crises that we are discussing here. So we're going to be talking to people who are directly affected, who've had businesses closed, who've been cut out of opportunities from the city.
What's the date on that? Can you give it to our audience? The ones who
we don't have our date confirmed. Okay. So we're getting a few more sponsors, but again, follow Victory for Oakland. Sign up at victoryforoakland.com where we release all of our events once they've been confirmed and once we have our RSVP link up. But
well, if you do it,
stay in touch with me. We got a long way to go to November.
If you do it on Thursday between 4 and 6, or between 2 and 5, or between 3 and 8, I will be there and we will do a live podcast.
Okay. Y'all all heard him. This is recorded.
Yes.
This is my receipts. This is my receipts that y'all will be there.
And we thank you for coming on the show today. And to other candidates who may have listened to this show today or may be encouraged to listen to the show today, if you want to come on this show and tell us your plan, we would love to hear it because right now, Oakland is planless. So we're hoping to get a great mayor in there. and gonna clean up Oakland and get black people off of welfare and get them some bus fare. Talk to you later. Have a good day.
Have a great weekend. Talk
You
to y'all
too.
soon.
Thank you, Allyssa. We love you here. We appreciate you. Thank you for being a friend of the show. Great information today. Stay strong,
Thank
sister.
you. Peace.
Well, audience, although this was another difficult episode, we wanted to be sure to help our audience with the help of with our very own Dr. Ashley Coleman, Doctor of Psychology, to help us all check in with our feelings. Now, I'm going to say that slow because me being raised by a father from the 50s and 60s and 70s, check in with our feelings. And I'm going to be brief because I want to end on time, Dr. Ashley. I thank you for being my friend, my sister, my colleague, and telling me, hey, it's okay to cry. Quit apologizing for that. When I grew up, and Father, I love you, but my dad would say, boy, you crying. I'll give you something to cry for. So we, specifically a lot of black men, we have these inner things going on that we don't know what's going on, but we know it's not right. So, Dr. Ashley, you bring life into this show. Thank you. And I literally mean that. You bring life and you save life. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Allyssa Victory Esquire, our civil rights leader, educator, and licensed attorney, for your appearance today. Her website is Victory4, and that's FOR, Oakland.wordpress.com. Or her Instagram at Victory4, and that's FOR, Oakland. Returning later in June is Janani Ramachandran Esquire, our other social justice. Boy, I'm surrounded by lawyers, doctors, accountants, women-owned engineering company. I'm telling you, America, black women are going to be running this world. Excuse me, you got me all here. Our grassroots fighter of human rights and candidate running for Oakland City Council District 4, Janani Ramachandran. See more of Janani via her website, Janani4, and that's FOR, Oakland.com, or on Instagram at Janani4, and that's the numeral 4, Oakland. Thank you, audience, for your thoughts, prayers, messages, and donations to Carlton. Let's not see another young brother get caught up in the system without going into his story. New hashtag for him is Stand with Carlton of Raleigh, NC of North Carolina, 2022. I've met this young man, and let me be clear here, audience. He does not deserve the treatment that he's getting in North Carolina. Let's look out and bring another young brother home who's a business owner and an asset to his community. And that's Carlton Harris. Carlton Harris, Stand with Carlton of Raleigh, NC 2022. And NC is North Carolina. A special shout out to Donnie Glover of BlackUSA.News and current sponsor Magnolia Engineering and Construction. Visit Magnolia Engineering and Construction at their website, magnoliaengineeringandconstruction.com, to join our Black Business Roundtable advertising family or to be a possible guest on the show. Reach us via our email at bbrt2021@hotmail.com. Include your company name and address, website, company phone number, and social media page info to our email address, and that is bbrt2021@hotmail.com. We have a network of shows hosted by Mr. Donnie Glover, such as BlackUSA.News, Morning Show with Donnie Glover, Shared Space, Frontline News, Troy Rawlings Show, The Beverly Smith Show, and stay tuned as new shows are added. Black USA News, you're doing great. The information and contact, and allowing Dr. Ashley and I to come on and do what we do to help educate our audience. We continue to ask for your social media support and share these hashtags. Hashtag Stop School Bullying Crane County TX 2022. Hashtag Driving While Black, Michael Thrash, Taylor County TX, and that's Texas, as the one previous. Attach our podcast link from October 14th, listed once again in today's podcast description for Michael Thrash's story. Take action on your social media, click the hashtag, and tag us too. And I've also reached out to the NAACP president to get him involved because we need to bring this closure. We need to get this man his money back. And Michael Thrash, we're going to continue to stay on this as we did the school bullying now, which is being investigated by the federal government and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Stop school bullying in Crane County, Texas. So we're on it. Texas, you got the cavalry coming. Thank you, audience, for tuning in. And remember, together, we can listen, we can learn, and we can share, because I know you care. This is Doug Blacksher and Dr. Ashley Coleman of the Black Business Roundtable. God bless. We'll see you next week. Good night. Thank you.